This here, everyone, is the steel bridge. And if you look, the Max lines, cars cross over it here. But if you look down here, you'll see railroad lines of various sorts come in. And the kind of under part of the bridge down here is mostly just rail lines going through there. And at one point in this city's history, there was a murderer hiding in the darkness of night down along these railway lines. His buddy shacked up trying to hide at Union Station over here. After a brutal murder following a succession of crazy events, on a new episode of Historic Murders of Portland. The ground's shaking. It's shaking at my feet. This bridge really needs a lot of work done. But anyway, my story that I'm about to bring to you now doesn't start in Portland. It actually starts at Fort Lewis, quite a ways from here. We have two guys that are in the service, and they're staying on the base there. A guy named Houston Waters and John Tillman. Come November 11th, 1920, these guys are given 1 day leave from the base. 1 day. And these young pseudo-military men snatch up a couple automatic weapons from the base and they leave. And they head out on a very lengthy road trip that took them way up into Washington, up to Olympia. Way north of here. And, they had these weapons on them. And they ended up in Washington, and ultimately they ended up coming south and settling their asses in Portland. Now, mind you, they were only supposed to be on leave for 1 day. Then it gets to be November 17th, 1920. It's been 6 days. It's been almost a week. These guys are practically AWOL from their base. Or at least, their whereabouts are kind of unknown, and they've supposed to have been back for several days now. But instead of being back at their base where they're supposed to be, they're meandering the city of Portland with automatic weapons. So upon arriving in the City of Roses, Houston Walters and John Tillman, at least particularly on November 17th, 1920, decide to just go on a robbery spree, and they have the weapons to do it. The first man they approach is a guy named O. Lindergaard, who they approached on 1st and Stark, which is about, 10 blocks this way. And then after that, they approached a guy named E.T. Fanning at 19th and Everett, which would be several blocks this direction. Because this is Gleason, so Everett's 1 street down. So literally about almost 19 blocks this way. They rob a guy named E.T. Fanning. And the peak of events comes with the third individual that they rob. Bicyclist almost hit me. I freaking hate Portland bicyclists. They think they own the town. And you don't. You just got 2 wheels. What have I got? I've got a brain filled with historic knowledge. Anyway, what was I saying? Oh yeah, I was going to take you to the site of where the third robbery of the day happened for Walters and Tillman. We're now coming up to the intersection of Flanders, which is the crossing street, and 9th. This was the location of the third robbery of the day for Walters and Tillman. However, this one did not exactly go according to plan. The first guy they went to, they got a couple bucks off of. The second guy got a couple more bucks off of him. But at this intersection, they encountered a guy named, I think it was Byron Rife was his name. His last name was spelled R-I-F-F-E. If you know last names, you have a background in that, tell me, is it Rife? Is it Riffy? Riffey? I don't know. But anyway, Byron. We'll call him Byron. They approach him, accost him at gunpoint, and Byron is not gonna just lay down for these guys. He actually starts mouthing off to them, pisses, I think Walters off. He seemed to be the more volatile of the two. And he went to hit Byron. And in the process of doing so, he hit him with the hand he was holding the gun in. The gun went off. So all of a sudden a gunshot goes off here at Flanders and 9th. And these guys that are, for the moment, kind of just sneaking up on people and being like, give me your money, come on, let's go. And then bailing. Now a gunshot's gone off. A bunch of people are going to hear it. They have to get out of Dodge, as they say. And so they either start running this way or they start running this way. They ultimately ended up a few blocks down in this direction. And they were coming from this direction anyway. I don't really know what their game plan was, but it seemed like they started down by the riverfront. They ended up several blocks back this way, and then they ended up here, and then ultimately ended up running off more in this direction. And so the third robbery doesn't quite go so swimmingly. You know, they managed to get a few bucks off the first guy, a few bucks off the second guy, but one of their weapons discharges with the third guy. So you've got gunshots happening in the area. Obviously, by the time the first victim gets, pinched, or at least pinched by the guys with the guns, authorities are starting to get calls, and they're having to start reporting to the situation. And so by the time police officers are responding and going out and looking for these guys, they've just, they're probably in the process of taking care of this third robbery over on 9th and Flanders. So that's not far from where I am right now. So we have an Officer Jerome Palmer and his partner. They're both about to go on their lunch break, Portland officers, when they get told there's guys in military fatigues. These guys were dumb enough to wear their military clothes, and they're, robbing people left and right. And so they come to this general area. I think they were just a couple of blocks from here. This is 5th and Gleason. Not a great area. And they're just a couple of blocks from here. And they're like, everybody else. They're looking out for a couple guys in military fatigues. They start over up on Broadway. And they make it about a block from here. And Jerome Palmer sees two guys in military fatigues, guys who fit the description, here at 5th and Gleason. So they start chasing him, and I know one of them screamed out to them to stop. And when that happened, they've drawn their guns. They're led to believe that these guys are armed and dangerous, and they're mugging people at gunpoint and stuff like that. So they scream out. John Tillman actually hesitates, but Houston Walters is not so humane. He starts running this direction. We're headed directly towards, this is 6th and Gleason. And the chase is on. And in the process of Houston Walters and John Tillman running this way, and Officer Jerome Palmer and his associate right behind him, Houston Walters ultimately stops. They say here at 6th and Gleason. So it may have been this side of the intersection, somewhere around here. He stops, turns, and fires. Strikes and guns down Officer Jerome Palmer right here in the vicinity of 6th and Gleason. And so all hell kind of breaks loose at this intersection. This is actually, I'm surprised it's this quiet. This is usually a pretty loud area. Houston Walters and Tillman are coming this way. They turn, open fire, hit Jerome Palmer. He falls dead somewhere near this intersection. But now Houston Walters is just standing here, and Jerome Palmer's partner, he sees, they're opening fire, and, he sees his partner go down. So Jerome Palmer's partner fired on Houston Walters and actually hit him in the shoulder. And, it's total chaos. So Houston Walters and Tillman, they continue to book for it, and they actually escaped this area. I don't know how they got away, honestly, because, you got an officer with a gun and he's ready to fire now. His partner has just been shot, and of course Jerome Palmer died, right here of his injuries. And it's hard to say exactly what direction these guys fled in. It seemed like they were going this way in kind of a western direction. But it's hard to say what happened after that, because ultimately both, even though they split up, Walters and Tillman both ended up ultimately kind of going back this direction, back east. And maybe they were trying to throw the police off their, scent, so to speak. Interesting. I'm telling the story of a fallen Portland police officer from a century ago. There's a lot of police activity going on right over there. They were cuffing like 2 guys. So I'm now over by the iconic Union Station, just north of Chinatown. This is kind of all Chinatown over here. Right down here, this is 5th Avenue going that way. So only about 2 blocks that way is where Officer Palmer and his partner saw Walters and Tillman, and they started chasing them up. So the next block, so right over here, like again, only 1 or 2 blocks, is 6th and Gleason. That is where Officer Palmer was shot. So again, they're running in this direction. Walters and Tillman are running this way, but somehow they end up turning somewhere over here and coming back in this direction. But again, they split up. And while Walters seemed to have, for the moment, disappeared into the night, Tillman booked it for Union Station, and he was actually apprehended here. And Tillman was, again, clearly, if there's a leader and a follower, John Tillman was the follower. He was the guy, he was the guy that didn't pull the gun on the police. And when Jerome Palmer first yelled at them to stop because he saw 2 guys in fatigues and thought those are probably our guys, Houston Walters didn't blink an eye about running, but John Tillman kind of paused and hesitated for a moment, which means he was probably running a little bit behind Walters. So he was kind of between Walters and the officers. So when Houston Walters turned and fired, I wonder how close to being in the line of that shot John Tillman was. Like, it may have just whizzed past him, and maybe that was a wake-up call that he needed to split, that he picked the wrong guy to split from an army base with. Because they split at that point. I don't know if that was planned. Sometimes criminals just do that. Let's split, it'll be harder. I'll go this way, you go that way. And John Tillman somehow made it from over here, going this direction, kind of wrapped around, and was ultimately tracked down. I assume he ran into the Union Station, was maybe trying to hide here. Maybe he was going to try to split town on, a train over here. I don't know, but he was tracked down. An officer has been shot, and there's muggings going on. There's officers spread all over the place, and they ultimately tracked John Tillman here to Union Station. Complication, however, is where is Houston Walters now? John Tillman, fine, we caught him. He's perceivably an accomplice. I don't even know if he's an accomplice, because it's not like he turned to Walters and said, hey man, shoot this cop. But, obviously he was involved in the muggings. He also ran from the scene. But the authorities want Walters. They want the actual killer. And, nobody really knew where he fled. Tillman was found pretty quickly. But Walters, it seemed like he almost got away. You wonder, did he keep splitting off in this direction? Nobody knew. So approaching the steel bridge right here. officers spread all around looking for this cop killer, and they almost missed him. Now, obviously, this fencing separating me from the railroad tracks here wouldn't have been here back in 1920, but you can see the railroad lines come from over here. Oh my God, are we about to die? They come through and they go under here, and they go through the underside of the bridge. Now, this is dark as it is in daylight, but this murder happened at nighttime, or at least by this point in the aftermath it was nighttime. And Houston Waters had crept off the street and was hiding near these, hiding behind one of these like metal support columns along the railroad. They say along the railroad portion of the bridge, and they say it was under the bridge, so logically, yes. So he was hiding somewhere in here, and it's all very dramatic. Houston Walters is hiding under here. He's got a gun on him, obviously, and he's trying to get away, and he's waiting. And an officer from over this direction starts approaching the bridge, and it's all dark. He can't see Houston Walters back here hiding with a gun. Like, this officer is good as dead. And then right in that moment, a train came around the corner and flashed that big beam of light on the front of it into this area, and it hit Houston Walters right on. He shined like an angel, and the officer that was approaching over here immediately pulled his gun, and Walters had no choice but to surrender. So unfortunately, one officer had to die, but one officer managed to escape by the skin of his teeth with that one train coming around the corner. And so Houston Walters was apprehended. He wasn't in good standing. He was wounded, and he actually had to be taken to the hospital before he could be taken downtown and charged with first-degree murder of a police officer. That wasn't going to go over well for him at all. And they actually had to do kind of a risky surgery to pull that bullet out of his shoulder, and there was actually some concern that he might die from, complications, maybe an infection, maybe just where it was. Maybe it was kind of getting in down here, maybe it was getting close to his lungs or something. But they managed to, as they say, yank that slug out his gam. Except it wasn't his gam, so that reference really didn't work in this situation. Oh. What timing? Get ourselves a train. Where's your lights, buddy? You need your lights on. You gotta have your lights on. How do you know someone isn't waiting under there with a gun? And so we find out when all is said and done that, the reason they were committing these robberies is they just wanted to get back to Fort Lewis with a little extra spending cash on them. And I'm like, really? You went and mugged a bunch of people just to have some... Like, you're several days back to the base. You're in trouble, guys, and you are running around mugging people because you want a little extra spending cash and get back to your army base. And, like, what are you going to spend your money on when you get back to your army base and you're just there? Like... I don't know. But these were young guys, It ultimately came out that John Tillman was only 17. He wasn't even a legal adult. And again, probably a kind of like unwilling participant in this whole thing. Again, Houston Walters was the alpha of these two. And it even came out that, Tillman was so not into what they were doing that... when they had this encounter with Byron Riffy, again, whatever his name was, and when Houston Walters wasn't looking, he actually put the wallet back in, Rife Riffy, I don't know his name, he put his wallet back into his coat. He actually gave him his wallet back that they took from him. So, this guy was obviously a kind of unwilling participant. He probably wanted to go out and have some fun. He obviously agreed to split from the military base for a while, but I mean, in the end, it seemed like he wasn't really into a lot of what they were doing, and so because of that, he ultimately was just, again, being underage, I think he just was essentially, deemed a juvenile, and he was made a ward of the court, and he was sent off to the boys' school in Salem until he turned 21. So his punishment wasn't horrible, but, he did get punished for his actions. He was pretty much just charged with robbery, and that was about it. But anyway, so finally, upon getting his surgery, getting to a position where he could actually be taken to court, he said Walters, because he apparently was just I don't know, he seems to be a pretty erratic guy. Definitely not someone I'd like to think about being a member of our military if he's going to go off half-cocked the way he did in downtown here. And he pled not guilty because I don't think this guy was... I don't even know if this guy had a real moral compass on him. And he pled not guilty to first-degree murder. And then apparently he had a total just freak-out meltdown come December. So it would have been December 1920 when he ultimately was convicted on first-degree murder. He apparently just went into a convulsing freak-out because some disgusting people are like that. Like, you think, here's a guy that just was pulling guns on random people without a second thought, shot an officer of the law who was justly pursuing him in cold blood on the streets of Portland, and the guy has the nerve to act like it's a horrible injustice against him that he gets convicted of the crime. I think this guy was just a nut. A total freaking nut. Now, Walters was ultimately given a stay of execution. Appeals upon appeals. He managed to get his case to go to the Supreme Court. Drew this thing out for literally years. I don't know how, when it was so abundantly clear what he was doing. When you're running away from someone, an officer of the law, after you've committed a series of crimes, and then you stop and you turn, you aim, you fire, and you gun that person down on the street, that's pretty intentional. So I really don't know how this guy was able to draw this out for so long. Maybe he just had good lawyers. I don't know. But finally, his sentence was upheld after appeal after appeal, after going to the state Supreme Court. And finally, in March 1923, again, it's like almost 3 years later, Husted Walters was actually executed for that crime. So it took a while. He managed to add a few years to his life, but in the end it was all for naught. He just, and I almost wonder, like, if this was somebody else, if this was a random person, maybe this was even another person who was just a criminal in the city, and they were chasing him for whatever reason. Walters mugged him, and then he got pissed and chased after him and gunned him down. Would all these appeals have worked, even though it would have also been shooting in cold blood? Was it the fact that it was an officer of the law that helped things stick? Probably. Who knows? But that is that story. Story of the murder of Portland officer Jerome Palmer. And as a result of this wild week that a couple of renegade military men chose to go on. So again, thank you so much, everybody, for watching. As always, remember to like, share, subscribe, comment, Patreon, and as always, why am I saying as always again? I don't know. It's getting to be a long day. It's been Steve the Amateur Historian, I think, with another episode of Historic Murders of Portland. Catch you next time.